working at the Applied Population Laboratory at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Most of the work that I do comes along with my extension appointment, which is helping extension colleagues in counties and areas all over the state get access to demographic data and information and research that they need to do their work in local settings for planning and evaluation and assessment. So a lot of my work is really in that realm of packaging up data so that it can be used locally. In every decade in the years ending in 9, 0, and 1, my attention turns to the census and doing a lot of outreach and education about the census and the data that flows out of the census, and getting involved in the process of local redistricting in Wisconsin. This is my third round of local redistricting, and I'm pretty confident that a lot of the people who are listening in on this session have heard me talk about data and geography before. And in fact, almost exactly a year ago, we were in person in Madison, and you might have heard the same talk. So if some of this looks and sounds familiar, that's why. And but there's some new updates to share, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all. A former colleague of mine said that this process of local redistricting is like a dance between local government officials that always ends up in a mosh pit. That's stuck with me for a long time. This should be a simple process, but it is really an interesting, complicated, and engaging one. So before I turn to my comments for today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Applied Population Laboratory. We are a small outreach and research center at the university in the Department of Community and Environmental Sociology. We first and foremost serve as a clearinghouse for all sorts of demographic data and education and outreach. And we do that under two roles. One, which I already mentioned, which is the extension role. And then we are one of two agencies, along with the Demographic Services Center at the Department of Administration, that serve as state data center agencies for Wisconsin. State data centers are a formal partnership with the U.S. Census Bureau to be local disseminators of data and to educate Wisconsin citizens about Census Bureau partnership programs and geography.
We'll be doing yoga later today.
So I won't say much more about this slide. You can see some of the other things we do. We are going to be having a virtual booth at the exhibitor area. And if you have any questions or want to learn more about the APL, I invite you to come visit us over the next couple of days. So here's what's on tap for today. I'm going to be talking about the 2020 census, and the 2020 census is completed, sort of. I'll explain a little bit of that. I'm going to share a little bit of information about some things that were new. One was the internet response option, and then talk a lot about the impact of COVID-19 on the census operations, and then the delay in getting data. Then we're going to zoom in and look at some of the nuts and bolts of census data, including a pretty deep dive into what the data and geographies that are used for local redistricting in Wisconsin. And then I do want to take questions along the way if that's possible, but there will be some Q&A at the end of our session, I believe. We usually build in some time to do that. The PowerPoint that I'm going to be using today has some embedded links that will be good resources. So I will be sharing that a little bit later, wherever that will sit on the WLIA website. So the 2020 census is completed, and that's in spite of COVID-19. This is a little map that shows the self-response rates for Wisconsin counties in the 2020 census. And I don't have the scale here, which is bad cartography, but the darker colors of shades of purple or blue are the highest self-response rates, going all the way up into the 80s. And the lower response rates are the ones that are in the sort of tan orange, and those were down around 40s. Now, self-response is really a household that responded to the census by filling out their form and sending it back via the mail, or responding by telephone, or in the case of this census, responding with the internet option, which is going online with a secure ID and filling out the census for a housing unit. So the overall response rate was 72.2%, which put us third in the nation behind Minnesota, boo, and Washington. So we did very well in this census. One of the things that was an interesting aspect of it is that no data results have been published yet, and that's partly due to COVID-19. Just a little bit on that. Field operations were halted everywhere across the country. That's the people who go out and are conducting the census in person, or doing delivering forms to those areas that didn't get their forms via the mail. All those operations, field operations, halted on March 18th. And then on April 13th, all of the field offices, that is the offices, I think there were 6 or 7 of them in Wisconsin, that coordinated local field operations and outreach from the census, were closed April 13th through June 1st. So you can see how that would have been a setback to the Census Bureau's operations. So this internet response option really, in some ways, was a silver lining to COVID-19 challenges, because it allowed people to respond, even though in the field operations, part of the effort was to deliver forms to those places that don't get their mail at a usual, like don't have a regular city style address. And so what happened after that was that the Census Bureau was to get out a lot of publicity about using the internet option. In some ways, it was very useful in Wisconsin, especially in the North Woods, where there were very low response rates. But this was the first census to allow internet response. Previous censuses always had a mail-in response option, and by telephone or in person, but this was really a historical census in that way. So just if you're curious about what those internet response rates were, again, I did include the scale on this one, so better cartography. The internet response rates, as you can imagine, are much higher in the places that have higher access to broadband access. And that's mostly the southern, southeastern corner of the state, or a swath running up through the Fox Valley. The lowest internet response rates were up in the North Woods, where there is a lot lower access to broadband, but also a less digitally inclined population of people who are in an older age demographic. That's the best way I can put it. So we see internet self-response. The highest counties were in the high 50s, and the lowest counties were in the low 20%. Now, that doesn't mean that those people weren't counted. And I'll get to that in a second. So the other thing that made the 2020 census historic was that there was a pandemic that happened right in the middle of the crucial part of the field operations. Really, as they were getting to that part where they were doing a lot of outreach and getting out into communities and doing the promotion work to encourage people to fill out their census, that came to a grinding halt. There was a lot of adjustments that happened in terms of using more digital or social media outlets to get the word out. But the field operations, those people who were delivering the forms, or later going door to door to collect responses from people who had not responded, that sort of that door-to-door census that is part of the non-response follow-up, that really took a hit in COVID-19. So you can see here, there a little bit of a timeline of what was happening with the 2020 census. The census starts just before April 1st. That's the mythical census day. There's a response rate, total overall response rate already at about 25%. And then by mid-April, it's up to 50%. But then there's a couple of gap months where there really wasn't much happening to report on. And the non-response follow-up, well, first of all, the self-response option was extended from, usually it would have ended in May, but it was extended out to October. And so that's what was going on in May, June, and July. A lot of people were still responding via mail, via telephone, or via the internet. By August, there's an overall response rate of 75%, and that's about when the in-person non-response follow-up started to happen. And so you can see that by the end of October, at the point when the non-response follow-up operations closed out, this is for the nation, the total response rate, that is from self-response or this non-response follow-up option, is almost all the way up to 100%, 99.98% as of October 15th. The next step usually would have been delivering the data. And in previous censuses, that is due to happen by December 31st of the census year. Obviously, with all the COVID-19 delays, that just wasn't possible. And so in a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the new timetables look like. But that's an important number because that's the first data that comes from the census are what are known as the apportionment counts. These are the state population totals that are used to divide up the representation in Congress equally based on population. And I think you're going to hear a little bit more about that in the Legislative Reference Bureau portion of this workshop. So this just for comparison, this is what was projected before COVID hit, that Census Day was going to be April 1st. That still happened. And then the non-response follow-up usually would have tracked to happen around May through July. And then we would have been on track to get the data by December 31st for the apportionment accounts. And then the redistricting data usually is delivered on or before April 1st. So, but after COVID hit, the Census Bureau made some major adjustments in their timeline. And so now you can see that the non-response follow-up got shifted way forward, August to the end of November, and then the data capture part, which is kind of where we are yet because we haven't gotten any data, would have happened a little bit later after November. So now the adjusted schedule has the apportionment counts being delivered to the president on or before April 30th of 2020. And just recently, in the last week or so, the Census Bureau issued another update to the redistricting data that would have the Public Law 94-171 data or the redistricting data set delivered to the states by September 30th of 2021, with a window of a possibility starting in August, but that's their projection as of now. So as you can imagine, for the Applied Population Laboratory, we get a pretty excited about new data and when it comes out. So the next section of this presentation will really focus on the data that will come out of the 2020 census, and then take an even more detailed look at redistricting data, that data that's going to be used in the process of local redistricting in Wisconsin. So I'm a self-defined data nerd, so I really get excited for this. It's like Christmas in the year that the census data is delivered. So again, just to reiterate, when the data will be from the 2020 census will first be available, this was the original dates. December 30th. That's been shifted to April 30th. Usually in 10 years ago and 10 years before that, when I was giving this kind of talk, I would have been able to tell you what the new state population total was, but we don't know yet because it hasn't been delivered. Then the redistricting data, again, is going to be delivered on or before September 30th of 2021. And then a lot of the other data sets that come out of the 2020 census, we're not really expecting until later in the year. Sorry, that animation didn't quite work, but that said December 2021 is my best guess, is that's when it will start flowing. So what kind of data comes out of the 2020 census? Well, because it's a short form census that only had 9 questions this time around, it's the data that will be derived from those 9 questions. And it produces basic demographic information and counts of the population on characteristics like age and race and ethnicity, households and family relationships, and then just a little bit about housing units, whether they're occupied or vacant, and then about whether they are owner occupied or renter occupied. But even though the 2020 census only produces this basic level data, it is the mother lode of demographic data because it's a complete count, a comprehensive accounting for the population as of a point in time. The sort of mythical April 1st is what we use. And it is the most complete and pervasive collection of data that we get. It's also available for some very, very small buckets, pieces of geography that I'm going to get into a little bit later in this presentation. But because you can get it for these small containers of data called census blocks, you can make custom geographies out of that by aggregating those census blocks so that they fit into other kinds of boundaries, like a sanitation district or even in some places revised school district boundaries. It also allows for detailed cross tabulations of data for very small areas. And that means that you could look at something like age, population age 65 and over, and look at home ownership rates, or look at households and families by race and ethnicity, all sorts of wonderful things you can do with this data. So a number of years ago, almost a decade and a half ago, there still were 2 forms used to deliver the census. There was a short form, which is what we just looked at, and then there was a long form census that was part of the every 10-year census. And to respond to the need for more timely data, most of the questions on the long form were shifted from the every 10-year census to an annual survey called the American Community Survey. So it did replace that long form, and it is an ongoing continuous measurement survey, which means that it is taken every month in every county in the United States, and it produces annual refreshed estimates of the characteristics of the population. And so if you're looking for that detailed socioeconomic information that you think of as census data, things like education, income, labor force, commuting, all those wonderful things, we now get it from the American Community Survey. So just a little bit about where this data, you can find this data in lots of places, but the Census Bureau does maintain a one-stop shop data portal called data.census.gov. And this is a replacement for the American Fact Finder, which some of you may have gotten used to using. The data.census.gov site has some of the features of the American Fact Finder, and it's supposed to be a more plain language searchable data extractor. So this is where you can find any of the data that's going to come out of the 2020 census, the data from the American Community Survey, And then data from previous censuses, the 2010 census and the 2000 census, are available from the data.census.gov site. It also has all the other survey data that the Census Bureau puts together, things like county business patterns, the economic census, and a few others. So it really is a one-stop shop for all things coming out of the Census Bureau. So a little bit about what is redistricting data. So again, it's going to be released on September 30th of this year, by September 30th, I should say. And that release is what starts the process of local redistricting in Wisconsin. So the redistricting data file provides the population totals and the geographic data that's required to do local redistricting. The summary files will include data on total population and population by voting age, with tabulations by race and cross tabulations by race and ethnicity. So when all is said and done, because any person filling out their census form can identify as more than one race, there are lots of permutations in these race categories. So there's a total of 63 possible race categories, and those can be crossed by ethnicity, which is being not Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino. So there also is data on housing occupancy, and this data is available at the individual census block level. But it's also available for lots of other geographies like towns, villages, and cities, tribal areas, census tracts, and census block groups. So this is just a table that is the race table from the 2010 redistricting data file for Wisconsin, which I collapsed quite a bit. But you can see how we get to these combinations of race groups under a population of 2 races. You can see that the combinations of races that people chose, and then I collapsed these for 3, 4, 5. And it always amuses me that there was somebody in Wisconsin, or 8 people in Wisconsin, who checked all 6 race boxes on their census forms. I don't know, either they have a lot of identities, or they're having a little fun with the census. There are a couple of things that are new in the redistricting data file for 2020. One is, along with that occupancy of housing units, we're going to know the renter-owner status of those housing units. And we'll also get data on the population living in group quarters, the number living in group quarters, and the types of group quarters that they are. Now, group quarters are buildings or facilities where there are a lot of people living basically at one address. So the best examples are college dorms, nursing homes, most correctional facilities are group quarters, and even military barracks are group quarters. So that's new for 2020. Now, what's not going to be in the 2020 file, and not in any data releases from the 2020 census, any data on citizenship and any data on immigration status. So this was, the previous administration was pressuring the Census Bureau to figure out a way to include this in all the data, these 2 things. In spite of that pressure, and specifically due to an executive order by the Biden administration on January 20th, this data will not be in the file. So how will the redistricting data be made available? Well, it gets released to the states, to the state legislative leadership, and to the Legislative Technology Services Bureau whenever it gets released. And then it will be made almost available almost immediately via WISE Decade and the WISE-LR application. And I know most of you are probably familiar with WISE-LR, but it's a really fabulous program. It's almost like a paint by numbers mapping program that allows you to build wards or other kinds of election districts. The data will be made available almost simultaneously on the data.census.gov site. And then both the State Data Center agencies in Wisconsin, Demographic Services Center, and the Applied Population Laboratory will have early access to the data. We don't have any plans to make it immediately available on our websites, but we can certainly help you get access to it if you're interested after the release happens. Well, there we go. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about census geography. I know that I'm in a virtual room with a lot of people who understand geographic boundaries and geometries and things like that. And the way the Census Bureau thinks about geography is sometimes a little different. And there are two major categories of census geography. There are legal and administrative entities, and these are pretty intuitive, and they can be local or tribal governments, boundaries, school district, and even local voting districts. And these have some legal or administrative purpose, and they're officially prescribed and delineated and used for those functions. On the other hand, we have things that are statistical entities. And these are usually the result of some programming or analysis need of local data users. And they really have been in response to situations where the standard geographies, those legal and administrative entities, don't do enough to get you to the granularity or the kinds of buckets that you want to have data for. They often are delineated by local planners. In Wisconsin, the regional planning commissions have done a lot of work on these. They are done in partnership with the US Census Bureau Geography Program. The best example of a statistical entity is a census tract, where you're taking the county and dividing it up into smaller units that don't really have any legal or administrative use, but they're just to get small area data that is below the county level. So if anybody's interested, the Census Bureau is holding a webinar on how to use statistical geographies, and that's tomorrow. And when I'm done talking, I'll drop a link to that in the chat in case you're interested and want to sign up. So this is a wonderful, wonderful diagram that comes from the Census Bureau's Geographic Areas Reference Manual. And it shows the enormous range of census geographies for which you can get census data, all the way from the nation down to the neighborhood, or even the smallest buckets that are census blocks. And you can see the range of geographies that are available. Some of them are pretty intuitive. Some are nested. That is, they fit within each other. So starting at a state, counties fit in the states, census tracts fit in counties, block groups fit in census tracts, and census blocks fit in block groups. So you can have these parent-child relationships when you're doing data analysis. But the ones that for the redistricting process that are most frequently used are counties, county subdivisions, which are sort of the equivalent of municipalities in Wisconsin. Those are the towns, villages, and cities that fit within, or the parts of villages and cities that fit within a county. And then census blocks. Redistricting data is available for census blocks because that's what is used to, they are what are the building block for wards in Wisconsin. So again, just a little bit more detail. What is a census block and why do we care? Well, for redistricting, it's the most important small area geography. Why? Because by definition, ward boundaries, with a few exceptions, must follow and respect block boundaries. In its most simplistic form, local redistricting is really just that process of using census blocks and their population totals to build up to voting districts or wards in Wisconsin. So it is really important to understand what a census block is and how it fits with other small area geographies. Census blocks are generally those small areas that are bounded on all sides by either visible features like streets, roads, streams, and railroad tracks, or invisible features, which are sometimes the result of local government boundaries that aren't necessarily following a street. Sometimes property lines can form the edge of a census block. And then even imaginary extensions of streets or roads, or even in rural areas, fence lines are sometimes form a census block boundary. And again, they're important because generally wards must follow block boundaries in Wisconsin. So just for fun, I put together this little map of the fictitious town and village of Muskrat. And it shows a bunch of blocks, census blocks. Some of them have housing units on them, and some of them, like block 1001 in the lower left corner, there's no population and no housing units, but it's still a viable census block. It would show up in the redistricting data as having 0 population. Sometimes that happens in water bodies where there are blocks that are totally in water or in islands that are part in a lake, and those are sometimes called water blocks. So it doesn't matter how many people live in a block, they are all valid blocks. Down here is the house that I wish I had, which is my own ball field with my house on a single block, so I can go out and play baseball every day in the summer. Up in the to the top, you can see that even though there is a street here, which would form a census block boundary, this municipal boundary in the dotted line, if that street weren't there and those houses were tucked up against each other, would form census block boundaries. So there are lots of resources as we get into this process. You can see what we've been doing already in terms of training. We're right here on February 15th doing this workshop. And there will be one more training available for Wisconsin Land Information Officers on the 25th of February. And then I've listed resources for the agencies that are partners in this process in Wisconsin with LTSB, Legislative Reference Bureau, the Applied Population Laboratory, and the local government center at University of Wisconsin Extension does a lot of education with local government officials around redistricting. So that's all I have. And I don't know if any questions came in the chat or if there's anything that people would like me to address right now.
I don't think we got any questions, but if you feel more comfortable talking, you can unmute yourself. You're not blocked from doing that. Or write it in the chat. We have a quiet group today.
It's too cold.
There you go.
All right. Well, remember, I think we will have some time later. So if anything comes up, just let me know. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Legislative Reference Bureau, I think.
Thanks, Dan. You guys hear me okay? Somebody give me a thumbs up just to make sure that you're hearing me. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think Mr. Gallagher has a presentation here. Here we go. So good afternoon. My name is Joe Crowd, legislative drafting attorney for the Legislative Reference Bureau. I'm joined this afternoon with Stacy Duros, who's an analyst for the Legislative Reference Bureau, and Mike Gallagher, another legislative drafting attorney for our agency. So we'll start out with some kind of an overview and then get down into the nuts and bolts. So Stacy and I will be covering kind of basic redistricting law and principles. Mike will be discussing the local redistricting process, where we're kind of get into more of the nuts and bolts of what you're going to be doing. Before that, I want to just say a few words about the Reference Bureau. We're one of 6 nonpartisan legislative. Thanks, hands up. just to make sure has the presentation here. So reference bureau, and Mike Gallagher, another kind of overview. One, we were the first legislative service agency in the committee first that we have as far as public policy in the state. And our agency was a model for both the state and federal agencies that do similar work. Partisan legal research and information services. We draft all proposed legislation. Right now, we're working on the executive budget bill, which will be introduced tomorrow, I believe. We do legal public policy and historical research, provide information about the legislature and its proceedings. In addition, we publish a number of things, the laws of Wisconsin, the statutes, the Wisconsin Administrative Code and Register, the Blue Book, and then numerous articles and other publications on a whole variety of legal, historical, and public policy issues. So I encourage you to visit our website. Those publications are all up there. Specifically, I need to highlight this publication, the Redistricting in Wisconsin 2020 Guidebook. That will cover all the material that Stacy and I and Mr. Gallagher are going to cover this afternoon in a lot more detail, including kind of the history of redistricting in the state of Wisconsin, going back all the way back to statehood. So in terms of the Legislative Reference Bureau's role in the congressional and state redistricting process, we draft the redistricting bill or bills, because there may be several, that are introduced for consideration by the legislature. So now that we've kind of touched on that a little bit, we can start talking about the kind of the basic law and principles. And first we'll cover the basics. So the first thing to talk about is terminology. The difference between redistricting and reapportionment. These terms are often used interchangeably to mean more or less the same thing, but technically they are different. The term reapportionment refers to the reallocation of seats in the House of Representatives after each census based on our kind of portion of the national population. Redistricting, on the other hand, is the process by which electoral district boundaries are redrawn to adjust for shifts in population and to ensure proper representation for all potential voters in a given geographic area. So why do we go through this in the first place? You may really wonder that this year, considering we're still waiting on data, but the U.S. Constitution requires that reapportionment of congressional seats occur every 10 years. Specifically, you're looking at that part of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, that provides an actual enumeration to take place within 3 years after the first meeting of Congress, which obviously happened a very long time ago, and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. This is often referred to as the census clause or the enumeration clause. It mandates an actual enumeration, a complete count every 10 years of every resident in every household in the United States. And then, of course, we have the 14th Amendment, which provides that representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state. Finally, under Title 13 of the U.S. Code, Congress has delegated the administration of the census to the Census Bureau. These two constitutional provisions and Title 13 provide for a complete count of the United States population every 10 years in order to reapportion the 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives to account for shifts in population over the last decade. So the federal census kicks off the whole process. Depending on population shifts as determined by the most recent census, some states will gain congressional seats, some will lose, most will maintain the same number of seats. That's what we anticipate will happen with the state of Wisconsin. After reapportionment, each state must then redraw congressional, legislative, and local district lines according to requirements laid out in the state constitution and state statutes. So in Wisconsin, under Section 3 of Article 4 of the Wisconsin Constitution, the state legislature has the power to redraw both congressional and state legislative district boundaries. Although not explicit in the language of Section 3, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has ruled that a redistricting plan must be enacted as a law in the same manner as other laws. So in other words, a plan must be introduced as a bill for consideration by the legislature, pass both houses, and then be approved by the governor. The governor may approve the proposed plan, or he or she may veto it. As with any other law, the legislature may override the governor's veto by a 2/3 majority vote in both houses. So given these kind of significant hurdles actually to passing a bill that way and implementing a redistricting plan, it's not surprising that in the state, those redistricting plans have typically been promulgated by the courts. Not so much the congressional plans, but definitely the state legislative plans. 2011 was a notable exception. However, we had unified control of state government. The same party was in control of both houses and the governor's office. So now we know why redistricting must occur. We can now discuss federal and state requirements. Like all states, Wisconsin's congressional, state, legislative, and local electoral districts must comply with two very important federal requirements: equal population and minority protection. Equal population is the most fundamental principle in redistricting because it underpins the whole process. This concept of equal population ensures adherence to the one person, one vote principle, which the U.S. Supreme Court has found to be embedded in the equal protection requirements under the 14th Amendment. If districts were drawn disproportionately with respect to population, the weight of each vote would be different. Note, however, that equal population refers to the general population in a given district and not to the voting population or the voting eligible population. The degree of population equality among congressional and legislative districts can be determined and evaluated through a few statistical measurements, which we have up here on the slide. They are ideal population, absolute deviation, relative deviation, and overall range. I'll explain what each of these measures means and its role in the process, and we'll look at a couple examples just to kind of aid our understanding of how this is going to work. So we begin by determining equal population, or begin determining equal population by first calculating the ideal population, which is the largest, it's the target population for each district in a redistricting plan. Ideal population is calculated by dividing the total population of the unit being divided by the number of districts being created. So for example, if we have a nice round number, the state population is 5 million, and there are 50 legislative districts, the ideal population for each district is 100,000. Of course, we won't have that kind of number. The numbers on the slides here will be closer to the reality. Those numbers are based on the estimated total population as of January 1st, 2020. So our total population in the state, the estimate, was 5,854,594. So hypothetically, in Wisconsin, if we were to redistrict using that estimate, the ideal population for a state Senate district would be 177,412, and for an assembly district, 59,137. Additionally, just for an example, the ideal population for a congressional district would be 731,824. So, of course, remember, this is only an example based on an estimated population. We wouldn't be able to use that population to redistrict. We have to wait for the federal census data and use that population number. So for each district in a plan, we can then calculate the absolute deviation. And we're talking about the absolute deviation for each district, which is the difference between the population of a given district and the ideal population. This measurement assesses the degree by which a single district's population varies, either exceeding or falling short of the ideal population. Absolute deviation is derived by subtracting the ideal population from the population of a given district, and that number is used to determine the extent to which an actual district is larger or smaller than the ideal district size. Larger will have a plus deviation, a positive value. If it's smaller than the ideal population, it will have a negative deviation or negative value. And this value can also be expressed as a percentage, indicating the proportion by which the population exceeds or falls short from the ideal. This result is called relative deviation. Relative deviation is derived by dividing a district's absolute deviation by the ideal population. So again, that's a lot of words, but we have examples to make it a little more concrete. So for ease of demonstration, let's stick again with an ideal population of 100,000 per person. Assume the actual population of a particular district is 99,000. The absolute deviation then for that district would be negative 1,000. The relative deviation would be negative 1%. Absolute deviation and relative deviation are used to assess equality of population at the district level. However, overall range is used to assess the equality of population of a redistricting plan as a whole. The overall range is the difference in population between the smallest and the largest districts in that plan. Overall range is used to evaluate the plan as a whole, whether at the level of the entire state or at the level of the entire county or municipality being divided into districts. This is the number you'll be using to evaluate population equality among the districts in your county or municipality. So let's look at another example. Again, using this 100,000 ideal population figure, assume the largest district in a redistricting plan has a population of 101,000. And the smallest district has a population of 98,000. In this case, then the overall range is 3%. So how did we get there? To get to 3%, we start with the ideal population, which is 100,000. We know that the largest district is plus 1,000. The smallest district is negative 2,000. So the overall range, when you ignore those plus and minus symbols, would be 3,000 people or 3%. For state legislative and local electoral districts, an overall range that is less than 10% is generally regarded as complying with one person, one vote. In litigation, courts normally measure a redistricting plan using this concept of overall range. We should note, however, that different courts refer to it in different ways. Some will use the terms well, the same issue comes up with the other terms, ideal population, absolute deviation, and relative deviation. Courts will use different terms for those as well. The terms I'm using are not uncommon, but they are by no means universal. So you might be asking why courts allow such a significant deviation in population in state legislative and redistricting plans, the local redistricting plans, especially in light of modern technology and statistical methodology. 10% is not an insignificant range, but to answer that, while equal population is a central principle of what we're doing, there are other competing interests and principles that a redistricting plan must also take into account. As the Supreme Court indicates in this quote, when drawing state and local legislative districts, jurisdictions are permitted to deviate somewhat from perfect population equality to accommodate traditional districting objectives, preserving the integrity of political subdivisions, maintaining communities of interest, and creating geographic compactness. And we'll talk more about this in great detail when Stacy follows my presentation. I do want to back up just a little bit and talk about congressional districts. Technically, there are different constitutional standards for establishing equal population in congressional districts and equal population in state legislative and local electoral districts. But the overall concept of one person, one vote still holds. Specifically, congressional districts must be as nearly equal in population as practicable. with the lowest possible deviation from ideal population in each district, and no level of inequality is deemed too small for a judicial challenge. This means that the population equality, that standard is strictly enforced at the congressional district level. State legislative districts, on the other hand, must be drawn with substantial equality of population with an overall range of less than 10% of the ideal population. And that same rule generally applies for local electoral districts as well. Wisconsin has historically achieved pretty much a strict population deviation standard for its state legislative districts, with an overall range of less than 2% going back to 1982, as you can see from this chart, with as low as 0.76% in 2011. That ends my part of the presentation. So Stacy will now discuss the second fundamental redistricting principle under federal law, which is minority protection and traditional redistricting principles.
Thanks, Joe. As he had just mentioned, my name is Stacy Duros, and I am a legislative analyst with the Legislative Reference Bureau. I will be talking about minority protection and traditional redistricting principles today. So while the requirement of equal population is essential to the redistricting process because it is designed to ensure equal representation in government, it still has to be balanced against other competing interests overall. Chief among these is protecting the ability of racial and language minority groups to participate equally in the electoral process. In 1965, Congress enacted the Voting Rights Act in order to remedy the inequality of opportunity that had been provided to racial and ethnic minority groups to participate in elections in the United States. Specifically, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits any state or political subdivision from imposing a voting qualification or prerequisite to voting, or a standard, practice, or procedure to deny or abridge the right to vote based on race or color. This section underwent a couple changes over the years. In 1975, Congress expanded the protections of the Voting Rights Act to include language minority groups in addition to racial minorities, and made permanent the ban on voting qualifications or prerequisites. And in 1982, Congress made the VRA apply not only to intentional discrimination, but also to redistricting plans that have the effect of discriminating against racial or language minority groups, even if this was unintentional. In practice, at its most basic level, a redistricting plan may be challenged if it splits up a racial or language minority group and combines its members with the majority group, effectively limiting the ability of that minority group to elect a candidate of its choice. This is known as vote dilution. In the redistricting context, a redistricting plan in which the voting strength of a minority group is diluted is most often challenged because that plan violates either the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, or because the plan violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, or both sometimes. Whether by effect or intent, the rights of members of racial and language minority groups to equal representation and participation in the political process are protected, even if the fundamental requirement of equal population among electoral districts must at times give way to ensure that those rights are in fact protected. Other than the required federal principles of equal population and minority protection, states impose additional requirements, which are generally referred to as traditional redistricting principles. The traditional redistricting principles that are most relevant for Wisconsin are compactness, contiguity, the preservation of communities of interest, and the preservation of political subdivisions. And I'll briefly touch upon each of these principles today. Compactness represents the general principle of minimizing the distance between all parts of a district. The Wisconsin statutes explicitly require that wards and aldermanic districts be compact. Contiguity is the general principle that each area within a district should be physically adjacent to another area that is also within the district. In Wisconsin, Senate and Assembly districts, wards, and county supervisory and city aldermanic districts are all required to consist of contiguous territory, with the exception of island territory. Respecting communities of interest in a redistricting plan means attempting to group like-minded or similar people so that they may elect a representative of their choice who reflects a common interest relevant to legislative representation. In Wisconsin, municipalities are required to take into account communities of interest in drawing ward boundaries. Respecting the unity of political subdivisions means avoiding having to cross county, city, or town boundaries when drawing district lines. Again, there are exceptions. The map on the left respects county lines, but the map on the right shows district lines that intersect the boundaries of the number of different counties. In Wisconsin, a county supervisory district must generally consist of whole wards or municipalities. City aldermanic districts must consist of whole wards, and wards may not cross municipal or county lines. In addition to the federal requirements, Article 4 of the Wisconsin Constitution governs the basic requirements for state legislative redistricting. Joe had already touched upon this earlier, but once again, the redistricting plan is something that's drafted by the legislature and is treated like any other bill that must be passed by both houses and approved by the governor before it becomes law. While there is no specific date by which state legislative redistricting must be completed, Wisconsin does have a deadline of sorts for the state legislature to adopt a redistricting plan under Article 4 of Section 3 of the Wisconsin Constitution. Section 3 provides that the legislature shall apportion anew the members of the Senate and Assembly at its first session after the federal decennial census. So the next round of redistricting is going to take place during the 2021 to 2023 legislative session, which ends on January 2nd, 2023. And Wisconsin typically enacts congressional district maps at or before the time state legislative maps are enacted. In terms of traditional redistricting principles, Section 4 requires assembly districts to be bounded by county, precinct, town, or ward lines, to consist of contiguous territory, and to be in as compact form as practicable, while Section 5 requires Senate districts to be of convenient contiguous territory. So now that Joe and I covered the basics of redistricting, Mike is going to discuss the specifics of local redistricting law, processes, and requirements in Wisconsin.
You are muted.
Okay, sorry. I'll start that over again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. That was me. That was all me. Okay. So to start over again. So that we gave you a lot of law and principle, constitutional law, statutes, principles that have come out through Supreme Court cases, U.S. Supreme Court cases, and other court cases, Wisconsin Supreme Court cases as well. The reason we go through all of that is because it's all relevant to the local redistricting process. And that's because the same basic law and principles that apply to congressional and legislative redistricting also apply at the local redistricting level. So for example, equal population, Joe went through that. Generally, a redistricting plan at the local level, just like a legislative redistricting plan, is going to be presumed to be constitutional if it's within that 10% overall range. It's a quote unquote rebuttable presumption, which means that there may be times when a court would find that it still violates equal population requirements if it's 10% or less, but it is really a strong presumption. And the Supreme Court is also, U.S. Supreme Court has also said that in local redistricting, when you're dealing with smaller geographic areas, smaller populations, there may be reasons for an even greater diversity in population between one district and another in the redistricting plan. However, that 10% overall range is a presumption. It gives you the presumption of constitutionality. Also, as Stacy talked about, in terms of constitutional and also statutory, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 requirements for protection of minorities in the redistricting process. That also applies at the local redistricting level. And in fact, the Wisconsin statutes require that that ward boundaries be established in a manner that enhances the ability of racial and language minority populations to participate in the electoral process and elect candidates of their choice. And we'll go through all of that. So the difference between legislative and congressional redistricting and local redistricting is local redistricting, you've got a detailed statutory process, okay? And I'll be going through that. It's a lot of information. I'm happy to take questions as I go along. If you'd like, we can also answer questions later. But I would also just encourage everyone to look at LRB's redistricting guidebook, because it has the local redistricting process and law really set out in detail. So I think that's going to be a good resource for you. All right. So with that said, I will move on. There we go. Okay. So with respect to the process itself, local redistricting in Wisconsin occurs in 3 phases and requires cooperation and coordination among counties and their respective municipalities. The process starts at the county level in phase 1, with counties adopting tentative supervisory district plans, moves to the municipal level in phase 2, in which municipalities adjust ward boundaries as needed, and concludes in phase 3 with counties adopting final supervisory district plans and cities adopting city aldermanic district plans. And that's in cities that don't elect their common council at large. So each phase consists of a 60-day work period, and generally each phase has to be completed before the next phase can begin. And it's a 60-day period, but that doesn't mean that you can finish, that you have to take all 60 days at any one of those phases. The county supervisory district plan could be done in 60 days, or it could be done in 30 days. And if it's done in 30 days, then the municipalities in that county, their 60-day window for establishing ward boundaries start after the tentative plan is adopted by the county board, not after that 60 days that the county board would otherwise have to adopt a plan passes. Okay, so there's also, I'm just going to talk about this once, but it occurs several times in the statutes. In each phase, there's a court remedy if the governing body of the relevant county or municipality doesn't adopt the required plan within that 60-day window. So basically, if a plan's not established, by the end of 60 days, then say it's the tentative county supervisory district plan. County fails to do that, there's a 14-day window for anyone in the county or any municipality to essentially go into court and ask the court to establish a tentative plan for the county, excuse me, which is then superseded if the county actually adopts a plan, or once the county adopts a plan. And that process is provided for not just phase 1, but also phase 2 and phase 3. So the official publication of census data and block level census maps for Wisconsin starts the clock ticking on the whole process. And, in pre-COVID times, typically we would receive that data, before March 31st or by March 31st of the year following the census. For example, in the last redistricting cycle, the official census data was published on March 10th. 2011. But obviously that's not happening this time around. As Dan mentioned, we're looking at potentially not receiving data until the end of September, which to put it mildly kind of throws a wrench into the timing of the whole thing. I'll discuss how that might what impact that timing, that 6-month delay has at the end of the, or may have at the end of the presentation. All right, so just moving into the process itself. Okay, so within 60 days after official publication of the census data for Wisconsin, and then the statutes have a kind of a backstop date, but no later than July 1. Following the year of the decennial census, the statutes require each county board to adopt a tentative county supervisory district plan. So the county board's proposed plan sets forth the number of supervisory districts and tentative district boundaries, and a description of boundary requirements. Now, obviously, that July 1 date was intended as an absolute, kind of drop dead date. But if we don't receive census data until the end of September, counties won't be able to comply with that July 1 date, obviously through no fault of their own. Okay, so in what does county boards have to do? What's county boards' duties in passing a proposed plan? The county board must solicit suggestions, and these are all statutory requirements, and you can find them in 5910 of the Wisconsin statutes. Solicit suggestions from municipalities concerning the development of an appropriate plan. Hold a public hearing on the proposed plan. After the hearing, the plan can be amended to incorporate suggestions from municipalities and the general public in the county. Submit a copy of the proposed plan to each municipal governing body in the county. In the event that a municipality needs to be divided between 2 or more supervisory districts that cannot be accommodated within the existing ward plan, the county board must submit a written statement to the municipality that indicates the approximate location and population of proposed wards. With respect to the plan itself, the plan must satisfy certain statutory requirements. Again, you can find these in 5910. Specifically, the number of districts must equal the number of supervisors. The number of supervisors that a county may have depends on population. And the population ranges and associated number of supervisors for counties are set forth in section 5910 of the statutes. And you can also find them in a convenient table in the LRB Redistricting Guidebook. The districts must be substantially equal in population, applying all of those principles that Joe talked about, and keeping in mind that 10% presumption. Each supervisory district must generally consist of one of whole wards or municipalities. So the county board may propose splitting municipalities, however, in order to establish the creation of county supervisory districts of substantially equal population. Under the statutes, whenever possible, whole contiguous municipalities or contiguous parts of the same municipality must be placed within the same supervisory district. Territory within each district must be contiguous except for island territory. And island territory is territory of the municipality that's separated by water or separated from the main part of the municipality by water or by the territory of another municipality. All right. So moving on to phase 2. Municipalities have 60 days after receiving the tentative county supervisory district plan to adjust ward boundaries. But remember, as I said, the clock starts ticking on a municipality's duty to adopt ward plans as soon as the county adopts its tentative supervisory district plan, whether it takes 60 days or 16 days. So before moving on to discuss the details of phase 2, it's worth taking a moment to examine the nature and role of wards in the broader redistricting context. I have a little tickle in my throat, you probably noticed. So this is gonna be rude, but I'm gonna put a lozenge in my mouth and hopefully that'll help. All right. So wards play a central role in redistricting in Wisconsin because they're the building blocks from which congressional, state senate and assembly, county supervisory, and city aldermanic districts all are constructed. Ward boundaries are intended to be as permanent as possible, with changes made only to accommodate changes in population, alterations in municipal boundaries, and the mathematical requirements of creating electoral districts of equal population for purposes of one person, one vote. In many states, what Wisconsin calls wards are referred to as precincts, and the Census Bureau calls them voting districts. But that can be a little confusing. We have to note that wards are not electoral districts from which officials are elected. Instead, wards serve as administrative subunits that are aggregated into electoral districts. As such, wards are not subject to the one person, one vote requirement. Instead, they have to satisfy certain population ranges that are established by statute. Sorry. Okay. The statutes require all cities, villages, and towns in Wisconsin with a population of 1,000 or more to divide into wards. Municipalities under 1,000 are not required to divide into wards, but they may do so, if it helps in the administration of elections. And also the county board may ask a municipality to divide into wards in order to accommodate a county supervisory redistricting plan. An ordinance or resolution describing the ward boundaries has to be adopted by a majority of the members of the governing body. Okay, so in creating wards, municipalities are required to follow the standards set forth in 515 of the statutes, 5.15. Specifically, wards must be comprised of whole census blocks subject to exceptions. Wards are constructed by aggregating whole census blocks, as Dan talked about, so the population of the ward falls within the predetermined statutory range, which we'll talk about in a minute. The census block, Dan gave a very good explanation of what the census block is and what it might look like, so I'm going to skip over that. But I will talk about there are exceptions to the whole block requirement. In particular, for example, a census block may be split if annexed or detached territory divides a block, or if a block divides a block. I'm just going with that example. And in that case, the municipality may incorporate only the portion of the block contained within its boundaries. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's contemplating splitting blocks after the for purposes of accounting for annexations or detachments that occur after April 1 of the census year, after Census Day. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. And there are other exceptions, statutory exceptions to the whole block requirement, and you can see those in the LRB guidebook. So next, wards must suit the convenience of voters. To suit the convenience of voters, wards must, and this is statutory language, as far as practicable, be kept compact and observe the community of interest of existing neighborhoods and other settlements. Stacy touched on communities of interest a little bit, and so this is an example of one of those traditional redistricting principles making its way into the statutes. There are a lot of different things that can constitute communities of interest. For example, obvious examples are on a larger scale, at least, are rural versus urban. You can also take into account school districts and other kinds of connections between people in neighborhoods that are relevant to representation in legislative bodies. Wards must be comprised of contiguous territory. And again, the only exception is island territory. Wards must comply with population ranges specified by law. Again, they're not electoral districts, so they're not subject to one person, one vote. And we'll look at the applicable population ranges momentarily. Wards must lie entirely within one municipality and one county. They can't cross municipal or county lines. Finally, wards must be designated by consecutive unique whole numbers, beginning with the number 1. Okay, so these are the population ranges established by statute for wards. Wards may be established below the prescribed population ranges under a number of circumstances also specified by law, including municipalities under 1,000 that choose to divide into wards, island territory containing a resident population, territory that becomes part of a municipality after April 1 of the census year. Talked a little bit about that. Territory consisting of a portion of a ward, the remainder of which has been detached from a municipality, and wards established because of deviation between census geography and actual municipal boundaries. The statutes further direct that the population of a ward be established at a convenient point within the prescribed population ranges with quote, due consideration for the known trends of population increase and decrease. So the population of each ward should be set at a level that satisfies the applicable range, and that also takes into account that can also accommodate fluctuations in population over a relatively long period of time. Okay. So in terms of adjusting wards, although they're intended to be as permanent as possible, after the federal census, boundaries may have to be adjusted to do a number of things. All right. So number 1, pretty obvious, reflect changes in population. So municipalities may have to adjust the boundaries of those wards which, according to the 2020 census, have either gained or lost population, and as a result, no longer fit the applicable population range. A ward that exceeds the maximum range of the relevant population is to be divided into 2 or more wards. A ward that falls below the minimum of the applicable population range is to be combined with an adjacent ward, or combined with an adjacent ward, which is itself then subdivided into 2 or more wards. Reflect changes in minority population. I mentioned this before. So under the statutes, wards may have to be adjusted, quote, to enhance the participation of members of a racial or language minority group in the political process and their ability to elect representatives of their choice. So as I said, this requirement reflects the mandate under the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to enhance the participation of minority populations in the electoral process. Excuse me one moment.
We've got a question for you, Mike, if you'd like to take it.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Yeah, so if my municipality is divided by a county boundary, do I have to start renumbering my wards at 1 in each county?
I think the answer to that question is yes. Well, so the county splits the municipality, and you've got a ward in, you've got, a ward in one county and same municipality ward in another county. I'll have to look into that.
Okay.
So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, make a note of that question.
Yeah,
and I'll look at the statutes to see how that might be handled, because I don't know the answer.
Okay.
And if you have whoever is asking that question, just if we can get their contact information, or if they can feel free to send me an email directly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thanks. Okay. So we're on minority population. And so again, wards are not election districts, we're electoral districts, but they need to be combined in such a manner as to ensure that the requirement to enhance the participation of racial and language minority groups in the electoral process is facilitated. Reflect changes in municipal boundaries. Ward boundaries must be adjusted to accommodate annexations, detachments, or other changes in municipal boundaries that have occurred since the previous ward plan was adopted. So under the statutes, generally speaking, wards must reflect the municipal boundaries in place on Census Day. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of history on this. This is a question that's been coming up a lot for good reasons. So in 2011, Wisconsin Act 39, the legislature, because it anticipated passing legislative and congressional district maps and having them signed into law on an expedited basis, passed Act 39, which accommodated that happening. And so anyone who participated, I've been at LRB 10 years, but I didn't start drafting in elections until a couple of sessions after that. So I didn't participate in it, although I was certainly, kind of aware of what was happening in the districting process. And anyone who is on the call right now who did participate knows that, what happened was that actually did happen, and then ward boundaries had to be adjusted to accommodate the legislative and congressional redistricting. Part of that act was changing the quote unquote snapshot date of municipal boundaries for purposes of redistricting. Before that, before Act 39, ward boundaries generally had to reflect the municipal geography as of August 1 of the year following the year of the federal decennial census, which makes sense, right? Because that your ward plan should be done by that point. August 1, that would be, if they weren't done by that point on that day, they would be late. Okay. But in Act 39, that snapshot date was changed to April 1 of the census year. In other words, Census Day. And I've actually looked at the drafting file for Act 39 to try and figure out, to see if there was anything helpful there, and there wasn't. I'm fairly convinced that the reason that happened is that if the legislature was going to be doing legislative and congressional redistricting before we had ward boundaries, they were going to be doing it based on the census data. Okay, so based on the census block maps. But the law also required that municipalities adjust their ward boundaries to accommodate a legislative redistricting plan. And also the law still contemplates detachments and annexations being taken into account. You have to split the block if and the census block established as of the April 1 as of Census Day, in order to accommodate an annexation or a detachment that occurs after that day. So, but it's an issue, and it's something that LRB is looking into, and maybe if there is any silver lining in the delay in getting census data, it gives us a little more time to try and figure out what information to provide to locals with respect to the whether and to what extent any changes in municipal geography after Census Day are taken into account in local redistricting plans. So I know that's a big issue, because obviously, you've got a year and a half between Census Day and in a typical redistricting process, contemplated by the statutes, where you could have changes in municipal boundaries that aren't being taken into account. And then, ward plans are adopted, and then they have to be revised. And anyways, so it's something that's on our radar and that we're looking at. All right, where were we here? Okay. So ward boundaries may also have to be changed to accommodate county supervisory district plans. Under the statutes, a municipality must make a, quote, good faith effort to accommodate a county's proposed supervisory district plan, and must divide itself into wards in a manner permitting the creation of county supervisory districts of substantially equal population. So that's what's driving that. It's the equal population requirement that drives that requirement to make a good faith effort, because the county is trying to establish supervisory district plans that satisfy the relevant constitutional and statutory requirements. All right. Facilitate the creation of aldermanic districts of equal population. Okay. And then finally, and I already talked about this a little bit, to accommodate a legislative redistricting plan. So of course, in the typical cycle, congressional and legislative redistricting plans are not put in place until after ward boundaries have been established. And in fact, the entire local redistricting process complete. That was reversed in 2011. I always hate to speculate, but just as a matter of political reality, it's not likely to happen in this cycle. But I would hesitate to make any predictions about this cycle, because I think about 3 weeks ago, I was saying that July 31st, 2021 was the worst case scenario for receiving census data. And so now the Census Bureau says September. So I'm not going to make any predictions, but as Joe said, because we often have divided government in Wisconsin, the courts have typically put in state legislative maps up until 2021. Okay. So once a municipality adjusts its boards, it has 5 days to provide a copy of the provide to each county in which the municipality is located, a copy of the resolution or ordinance, a list of census block numbers contained in each ward, an identification of any split blocks, a map of the municipality illustrating the revised ward boundaries, a report confirming the boundaries of the municipality and the boundaries of all wards in the municipality. Okay. So finally, phase 3. After the completion of establishing ward plans, the third and final phase requires that counties adopt final supervisory district plans, and that cities that don't elect their common council at large establish aldermanic district plans. The county board is required to conduct a second public hearing, after which it adopts a final supervisory district plan and numbers each district. The chairperson of the county board must file a certified copy of the final supervisory district plan with the Secretary of State. And then the Common Council of the city, again, not electing its Common Council at large, has 60 days to establish the aldermanic district plans. Aldermanic districts must be as compact an area as possible and contain whole contiguous wards. Okay. So just to finish up, this is the default local redistricting timeline. Okay, but it's obviously out the window. So if we, assuming we don't get the redistricting data needed for local redistricting until the end of September, obviously, that's when the whole process is typically done, and oftentimes well before that, depending on how quickly the process goes. So as Dan mentioned, we had a 4-month delay initially. It was July 31st, although the Census Bureau for a while was saying that they were streamlining their processes and going to get everything to the states on time. And that's no longer the case. And now that they're saying they can't even meet that July 31 deadline, so it's going to be September, end of September, on or before September 30th. So what does that mean? You really have to look forward at the 2022 election cycle. And what that means is that if you don't have plans in place by December 1st, which is the first day for nomination papers circulated for the spring primary, then you're going to that spring election, the February 15, 2022 spring election, primary, and the April 5 election would be under the existing maps. Okay, so even though you're going through redistricting, assuming with redistricting data coming in so late that the whole process isn't complete by December 1st, then the election next year will be held under the existing maps. And so, we were wondering, are we going to be able to make it, or are we not? But actually, having the Census Bureau say that they're not going to get it to us until the end of September, at least gives us a little bit of certainty, because now we know what's going to And I think that's really, I mean, we can talk more about that, but with that, I think I'll finish and we can open it up to questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen here.
This might be a good opportunity to take a few-minute break. There may be some people that need to use the restroom or replenish their water or something. It looks like, well, we do have a question though. In the chat, Eric Damcott is asking, is it all for one or one for all? That is, if one county has an adopted plan December 1st, can they use the spring 2022 elections, or do all counties need to have their plans adopted in place by December 1?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I know that the Elections Commission is actually looking into that question. Just logistically, from my perspective, looking at the statutes, I don't see why not. But the Elections Commission, they're looking at that. And so that's definitely another one of the questions that is coming up that's on our radar. It's a really good question. And we'll be providing more information, or the Elections Commission will, at a later point.
Okay, the next question was from Tom. He says, how does the new nonpartisan commission change the process?
Yeah, I can take that one also. So the governor's nonpartisan commission is a commission that was established by executive order, and it doesn't have a role in the legislative process. But my understanding is that it's going to come up with maps, and any legislator could introduce those maps, right, for consideration by the legislature. But because maps have to, redistricting plans, if they're not put in place by the courts, and that's also something else that could happen, is any maps that the commission comes up with could also be submitted to a court in litigation if it gets to that point. But otherwise, because it is a legislative process in Wisconsin, some states have a nonpartisan commission that actually, promulgate maps. We don't do that here. It has to be passed just like any other bill. But, I have a feeling that you'll have legislators introducing those maps for consideration in the legislature. Does that answer your question, I hope? I don't know if Joe had anything to add to that.
No, I think that covers it. I mean, the commission, like Mike said, would have to go through, the governor would have to make that request for a plan, or a legislator would have to.
It looks like Tom confirmed that you answered his question. The last question, it looks like, is how long do you expect new information to be populated in WisVote? That step needs to be done after redistricting and before December 1st, correct?
I'll jump in quick. I think by WisVote, you're referring to the Wisconsin Elections Commission's like voter registration software. So that's another question we would have to send to the Elections Commission for verification. So we'll make sure, I started a list of some questions for them. So we'll make sure to reach out to them and kind of follow up with those.
And I see that earlier question that says, hey, Mike, did you say that we are no longer certain that they can do mid-redistricting block splits? And so the answer is that the statutes do contemplate block splits for certain situations, annexations and detachments, for purposes of establishing ward boundaries. But there may also be incorporations or consolidations, and it's not clear what would happen in that case because the statute only references annexations and detachments. And as I said, this is something that we're actively looking into. The April 1 of the census year snapshot date obviously creates, can create a lot of heartburn for local governments because that year and a half can include a lot of changes in municipal geography. But we'll be providing more information on it at a later date. So, but we are looking at it.
Okay, how about we take a couple-minute break? Just let people run to the restroom if they need to. Do you guys want to just do, I don't know how much more, if we're on a time crunch or if we have a little bit of wiggle room? You're good? Okay. Okay, let's do, everyone come back in, you want to do 10 minutes? Does that sound okay? Good, Ryan says good. All right. So it'll be 2:45. We'll circle back. I'll just put some slides on the screen. We can listen to that jamming music again. All right, once I find them. Share my screen. I think I need this one. Let's let it catch up here. Maybe. There, let's stop this for a second. Back. All right. We are maybe back from the break. Let's see, got some screens turning on. Hope everyone's having a good time. I've been posting links in the chat, not necessarily directly related to this particular session, but things about what's going on behind the scenes in Slack and things like that. So check it out if you are so curious. You can also save the chat window on your personal hard drive. If there's a bunch of links in there you want to save, and instead of trying to grab them out, you can just save your chat. Not that you guys aren't all used to Zoom by now, but just in case.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Squires. I am the GIS manager for Legislative Technology Services Bureau. We're a service bureau within the Wisconsin legislature. Hopefully you can all hear me and see my slides and everything. So I'm here today to talk to you about the software and logistical aspects of redistricting. So I'll talk to you here about WLIA, which is our software platform, and we'll kind of go through some slides together, kind of the overview of the whole software package, I guess we'd call it. Excuse me, sorry. So if you have any questions, and I'm sorry, so we'll go over some slides, and then we'll go over to some hands-on kind of interaction with it. So I'll give you some logins so we can all kind of go through the software together. Online, you'll see Zach Robinson, Colleen Hermans, and Grace White. They'll be here to answer any questions, so please enter the chat in there, or if it's something better for the group, you can ask me. Where's my toggle? Where's my mouse? Everything's frozen. There we go. Start off with a good start here. Okay. Okay, so WLIA, this is the third iteration of WLIA, the Wisconsin Shape Editor for Local Redistricting. That's what it stands for. It's a web application. You don't need any kind of GIS skills to use it, but it does interact with GIS systems. So it's used to draw county supervisory districts, municipal wards, and aldermanic plans according to Wisconsin state statutes. It also is used to split your blocks and kind of administer your whole local redistricting process. So the WLIA is basically made of two parts. The WLIA Administrator, which is kind of a main menu guide where you'll create plans, share plans, open up old plans, see what the status is of every municipality in your county. You can see what there's conflict between the supervisory districts and the municipal ward plans. And then we can kind of use it to confirm and submit things to the legislature. So as we're going through these slides, if you want to sign in to this system, I encourage it to follow along. You can use any county you want to in the system right now. And then the password right now is Robin, just for this session. Later on, I'll give you a password you can use during non-session or non-workshop days. The system's wide open, so if you don't feel like using it right now, you can do this later on. There's also some features I encourage you using kind of not during this workshop time. Password is Robin. The website is wisedecade.legis.wisconsin.gov. It's WLIA is the name of the software, but we have a platform in LTSB called WiseDecade, which counties have been using for about 7 years now to submit wards, municipal boundaries. It's how you submit the parcels, school districts, a bunch of good stuff. So this is just a part that sits on this other platform called WLIA. So when you open up the application and sign in, you just see the WLIA Administrator, which is kind of this page here on the right. You'll see the 3 stages of redistricting that Mike just spoke about, which is the creation of supervisory districts, that one next to it, the creation of municipal wards, stage 2 there, and stage 3, the reconciliation of those 2. So there's also 2 additional ones there that are kind of extra. That one's called stage 0, we call it, which is confirmation of block lines. This is a step done by the land information officers at the county level upon the release of the PL 94-171 data, which is the actual redistricting enumerations. The LAOs can go through and submit their block splits. So the way this works is that they can use recently submitted data or municipal ward boundary data directly into the system, and they can split these blocks to incorporate incorporations or block splits. The last time the geometry would have been updated, because part of this WISE decade collection is we update this geometry and we pass it on to the US Census. The last time the geometry would have been updated would have been January 1st of 2020. So we'll be all the way through to potentially August of 2021 before we can start drawing again. So any incorporations, annexations that have occurred during that time will not be in the data. So that kind of occurred. The way that it sits in the schedule, there's nothing built into the statutes to allow this process to happen outside of the 360-day cycles. Unfortunately, the clock for you to start splitting these blocks and the clock for drawing supervisory districts is the same day, because the release and publication of that PL 94-171 data is what starts the official clock on 60 days from supervisory district drawing. But it's also the earliest then you could actually split the wards, because we need to know the populations and demographics within those blocks. I'm sorry, split those blocks yet, because we need to know the populations of those blocks before we can divide them and allocate demographics. So all that to say that LIOs will have to get in there right away as soon as the data is released, so they can get the splits in they need to, and confirm the block geometry is good to go before we're moving forward. So they don't want to eat too much time basically into that first 60-day cycle by sitting on this data and not waiting to get going, basically. So as soon as the LIOs confirm it, though, we can really start redistricting, and they can draw districts 1, 2, 3, stages 1, 2, and 3. The other stage I haven't mentioned there is aldermanic districts. Supervisory districts and municipal wards are created by, basically grouping census blocks. Aldermanic districts are created by grouping municipal wards. So anytime you've already confirmed a municipal ward plan in stage 2, you can start creating plans by clicking on stage A there and start drawing aldermanic districts. The only caution there, of course, is that if something were to happen in stage 3, where those wards would be changed during the reconciliation process, the aldermanic plan you drew would no longer be valid, because the building blocks underneath it will be different. You'll see the dates there on the left. So those will update dynamically as we're moving through the process for your whole county. Each of these cycles is 60 days, but that clock for your 60 days of your stage, so if your municipality, your clock starts as soon as stage 1 ends. So if stage 1 only takes a day to finish, the county is really fast, they're really super efficient. They drew it in 1 day, they're ready to go. The municipal ward clock would start that day. So they get 60 days from the end of stage 1. Same with stage 3. As soon as municipal wards, all the required municipalities that have required ward plans are submitted, the stage 3 clock will begin. And those dates will update automatically on the left side, so you can see projected out where your county's shooting. Obviously, the dates here in the screenshot are totally fictional. They're just when we happen to take the screenshot, basically. So this is that confirmation stage, stage 0. And by the way, I encourage you to submit questions. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of moving parts here. So I encourage you to ask questions as I'm going, so I can talk about it while I'm still in that section. So it'll make more sense, I guess. The process works that we changed a little bit. Actually, it's in screenshot. You can actually use what we've currently submitted as our BAS boundaries, or you can submit just directly a municipal boundary layer into it. And that's because of the delay. I'll mention now for LIOs that are familiar with BAS collection, what we do usually is collect in January and July of every year. And then the January collection is what goes to the US Census for BAS. In 2021, we were trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We were trying to do the BAS collection to update the actual BAS cycle like we would every other year. And we were also trying to get the data just before redistricting started, in April 1st approximately is our magic day. So we have your data for splitting the blocks right now. So basically the collection would have served 2 purposes. We still need to submit to BAS, so we still have to collect in March. They already gave us an extension of a couple of weeks to make it even close as we possibly could to local redistricting. Usually it's due on March 1st, but they gave us an extension to give us to March 16th to submit it to them, because we wanted it as close as possible to actual redistricting to collect that data, so we didn't have to submit it a bunch of times. But obviously that all kind of blew out the window, so we still have to collect the data, and it'll still go to BAS, and we'll have to collect again or just submit again later on when we get closer to the actual, the actual time to redistrict. I'll go over stage for LIOs in the audience. I'll go over stage 0 in more depth, even on our LIO training, which is the 24th, I believe. Maybe Zach can correct me if I'm wrong. 24th of February this month. So we have registered for that. 25th, there you go. 25th of this month. If you haven't registered for it, I encourage you to do so, but it's gonna be a lot of the same content basically today, other than a little more time maybe on stage 0. But this is kind of what it looks like. And we'll do this hands-on as well today, but it's basically the process of, it's basically just BAS, the same kind of process where you're looking at changes in the, these are looking at a block change versus municipal change. So you're looking at that and you're trying to decide, okay, what population has changed with this block division to accommodate this annexation. We'll go through that kind of more hands-on in a second, but it's a relatively, it's an intimidating process a little bit, but it's actually pretty simple when you get in there. Because the data has been so well updated over the last 10 years. So for instance, I looked at Adams County right now and I ran their current, the current data against the BAS data, and they only had 5 block splits at all. And all 5 of them were just conflationary geometric changes. So it seems like a lot of counties will probably had not to worry about this much at all. And I think Eric Demcat once pointed out too that most of these block splits are with annexations where there's no population there anyway. So this should be a relatively easy process, hopefully. So keep going forward here. So once those block splits are verified, and again, we'll do that kind of together in person. I'll go through the application that does this, but the supervisory districts can start being drawn. So you can start using that geometry that you just split right away in this system. It only takes about 4 or 5 minutes for it to actually integrate those splits into the system. It takes about a half an hour to actually split the blocks so you can look at it, but we'll go over that in a second. So drawing supervisory districts, they'll have 60 days to do it. Creating a plan is pretty easy. On the right side, you'll see a create new, load existing plan, select create a new plan, or select a plan that's already been created in the past by you or somebody else from your county. Enter a plan name. And this plan's like a working document. This is just for you to work in. So it doesn't have to be shared with anybody else. So this is just your plan name for you. You can set it how many district counts you want, so how many districts you want to start with for supervisors. It'll default to how many are currently in the county, unless it can't find that for some reason, it'll default to the maximum. You'll see at the top there that each county's population total determines where it falls within a series of maximums for the number of supervisors. So your county won't let you get more than a certain number of supervisors by statute. Then you enter an email, which will be used to send you the data and also recover your plan password. And then enter your password, and this password is just for you. It's not like the Robin I gave you today, which is getting you into the system. This plan password is just for you and your plan. So only you can access this plan. And then it has a start with option. So you can start as a blank plan. So everything's assigned to 0, all the blocks, because we're just grouping blocks together. We're not drawing lines arbitrarily in space. All those blocks are just assigned 0. Or you can start as currently enacted. So each block will be assigned as it is as of February 15th, 2021, where those blocks would actually align. And then you hit create and it'll open the plan. If you are actually in there following along and opening plans, you might notice the geometry looks pretty good. And that's because the geometry currently in the system is from Tiger 2020. It's all already in there. So you can see when we go to stage 0, when we do it together, you'll see how your actual geometry compares against it. But the demographic data is the 2011 population data that I just transposed onto the geometry just to have something to work with and play with in the actual system. So the demographic data is fictional and the geometry is real. So once a supervisory plan is established, the municipal plan is established. So supervisory plan gets passed. You can see in our example on our screenshots here in admin that's they were able to do it in a day. They're amazing. They did it one day on February 2nd. So that means my time clock as municipality starts on February 2nd, and I have until April 3rd to get all of the municipalities that are required to have ward plans passed. So now since I'm supervisory district was passed and in the system, I can compare as I'm drawing against what they passed at the county level. Same kind of scenario where you're just creating a new plan or load an existing plan. You select the municipality this time though. So in this case, I'm working in the city of Ashland. They have a default of 11 wards. I can start as existing again or as blank. But the right half of the screen here is kind of lower down. This is a single screen split, so you can fit it all on one slide. But the right side is the status of each of those municipalities in my county, so I can see how my county is progressing through. If I'm an LIO or a county clerk, and my municipality is wanted to draw, I can see, you know, who's got to draw still and who I need to contact. In my screenshot, it says no contact on record because I'm taking a screenshot of a test site, but in the real one, you'll see the actual municipal clerk's contact information, so you can contact them and say, ask them how their progress is going. Or if you have a question about the plan, you can contact them that way. Municipalities kind of fall into some categories here. Any municipality with less than 1,000 people does not have to create a ward plan at this stage. The other category is in yellow there, not required. And those are people that are less than 1,000, like the town of Peaksville, but have been divided by the supervisory district plan that was passed in stage 1. So town of Peaksville there is yellow. There's a little note in there saying this, you know, you're not required, they're not required to have a passed municipal ward plan at this point. Now they're not required in this stage, but they are required to deal with this eventually in stage 3, the reconciliation, because obviously a municipality can't have can't be divided by a supervisory district unless it has that in 2 different wards. So it's okay right now, and that's why it's yellow and it's not required. But in stage 3, it will have to be dealt with. Either the supervisory district will have to change in a way that the Peaksville will not be divided, or Peaksville will have to create wards. The city of Mellon, on the other hand, is gray. They're not required. They have less than 1,000 people. They haven't even passed a plan, but they're okay. At the very top, you can see 14 of 16 have an approved plan or a population of less than 1,000. When I become 16 out of 16, stage 2 will automatically end and kick over to stage 3. So your county has moved past its statutory requirements of what it needs to do in that second stage. But you can see my screenshot down there, the town of Sanborn is red because it has more than 1,000 people and it has not passed the plan yet. Once all the required municipalities, not to say, by the way, that if the city of Mellon wanted to come and make a plan, they absolutely could, and they can at any point, even once we progress to stage 3. Any municipality can still go back, and some of them will have to. So for instance, in stage 3 is reconciliation. That's where we have to deal with any differences between the ward plans that are passed in the municipality and what was passed as supervisory districts. You know, when you're drawing municipal ward plans, they don't have to necessarily follow what the supervisory districts were drawn as in stage 1. I think you're supposed to make best intent is the language. I might correct me if I'm saying that wrong, but I think it's best intent to follow the supervisory districts that were passed in stage 1, but you don't have to do that. So this is where the conflicts are dealt with. In my example here on the screen, I can see the town of Agenda must have had less than 1,000 people, did not even pass a plan, but that's okay because the supervisory districts must wholly encapsulate in a way, so they're good, they're valid, they're on green. Whereas the city of Ashland there did pass a plan. They passed it on February 2nd, but it in some way conflicts with the supervisory districts that were passed in stage 1, so it's showing us red. The village of Butternut in this example did not pass a plan, so they must have had less than 1,000, but they were divided, so they need something, either a plan now or the supervisory districts need to change. So this works is you click on stage 2 again and just pass a new plan for the city of Ashland, or if the county is yielding and changing the supervisory districts to align to what the city of Ashland would like as their wards, the county will click on stage 1 and resubmit a new supervisory plan. And that'll update in here. Once all these are green valid, the county clerk can confirm it, and that'll submit the final wards and supervisory districts to the legislature. Then the last step, which actually really occurs during stage 3 mostly, is the drafting of aldermanic plans, which can be done anytime after stage 2. Once your wards are in there, they're available in the system to draw in. As I mentioned, you know, drawing municipal wards and supervisory districts is the grouping of census blocks, whereas the drawing of aldermanic districts is the grouping of wards. So once your wards are in the system, it knows that if I assign this block, all of these blocks are part of that ward, so you're assigning all of these to your aldermanic district. So I've mentioned confirmations a few times. So the way the system is designed, it is designed to be kind of open, but only open to government. The way this works is, we just like in Wise Decade, there's a universal username and a universal password for you can share the county. So when redistricting starts, we'll send that username and password to the LIO, the county clerks, municipal clerks, and then they're encouraged if they have people that want to draw, GIS staff, if you have a town board member that wants to draw, a county supervisor that wants to draw, you can issue those credentials, say, Dane, Robin, here you go, and they can make plans. So we're going to have people that aren't necessarily GIS people in the system drawing, and that's okay. But we want to make sure we establish certain roles in the system that say that you are you, and that the LIO does the LIO's job. The county clerk is the final say on what's submitted to the legislature and what's the final supervisory districts. And municipal clerks have the final say on the municipal ward plan. Now, having said that, also the LIO's code and the county clerk's code also works for municipal approvals as well. Just because of the reality, we know that a lot of municipalities cede that that job to the county, and they'll take care of it. So instead of having to memorize 50 codes, LIO's codes do work for everything but the county clerk stuff. So at the bottom, when you're submitting your plans, as the final submission, so on the bottom left, you'll see the final supervisory plan. That's the bottom of stage 1 there. They'd select the plan. That was the final one we passed as a county board. Enter the ordinance or legal ID that created that plan, and then a confirmation code for the county clerk to submit it. When you do hit confirm, then it'll email all the municipal clerks in your county. It'll email everybody to know that here's where you can view the plan that was passed by the county. It's your time. Your clock has started. Please, municipalities, go in and draw your plans if necessary. On the right side, you'll see a drop down for the agenda, town of agenda, where something similar is done, where they can submit their plan. I'll hit the drop downs. So all that stuff is all just stuff in the admin. So I guess, is there any questions about the admin and kind of how all this works before I move forward on the editor and kind of more details that way? Oops.
Not seeing a come in so far.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so here's the editor. The editor is just it's a simply map application. It's launched when you create a new plan or you open an existing plan. It has an attribute table at the bottom, and then there's a bunch of tools on shy windows on the left. Let's see, and we'll go through this as we go through on the hands-on stuff, if you're not already in it by yourself, but I'll go through all these buttons and bells and whistles. But the stuff I do want to go over right now is the attribute table and some of the details in there. Into the system, statutes are built. Wow, I said that really strangely. Statutory things are built into the system. So the total population of municipality is what determines the valid range of the wards in a municipality. So larger municipalities can have a larger range, and those values are higher, whereas a smaller municipality has a smaller, tighter range where the wards can exist, and that number is smaller. So that's built into the system automatically, so it understands that this municipality is a relatively smaller municipality and must only allow wards that exist between 300 and 1,000 people. There's no requirement. I mean, the ward, the values are balanced. I mean, you can have a 300-person ward and a 1,000-person ward, and that's totally fine. They're not election districts, so you don't have to balance them out. There's deviation put in there because some people do like to try to balance their wards. So it's just an informational thing, but it's definitely not a requirement. It'll go red when you're exceeding the valid range in one way or another, but it won't stop you from submitting those plans, because there are situations where you've been drawn into a corner by a supervisory district or legislative district, or some other extenuating circumstance where you have to have a ward that's outside of that range. So it won't stop you from doing that. It'll just warn you that you're exceeding it, so to be prepared for that. Some of the geometric attributes are the contiguity. So I believe it was Mike that showed the town islands, the municipal islands, and those are allowed. Those considered still contiguous. So you can have a municipal island that's disconnected from the main bulk municipality. It can be part of the same ward as the main part of the municipality, as long as it's not divided by a supervisory district or a legislative district. In the system, you'll see that those will still show as discontiguous because they're not physically connected. So the contiguous column isn't the end all be all of is this contiguous or not. but it is a good guide, and it'll help you find blocks that were not connected. So when you click on that false button, so when it's not contiguous, it'll turn to a button that says false. Click on that, and it'll zoom to the individual block polygons that are disconnected from the main bulk of the ward. It can be handy if you accidentally, grabbed a block by, when you're assigning around, or if you are working your way across and forget a block, it'll grab it for you. The other geometric attribute is the compactness. So this is more relevant on the the supervisory district scale, but it'll show in both types of plans. There's no one algorithm that says this is the compactness algorithm, this is the one to be used. There's no court case that says this is the one, but there are three more popular ones. And those are Poultry-Popper, Schwartzberg, and Area Convex Hull. They're all measured 0 to 1, with 1 being the most compact. The most compact polygon possible is a circle. So the algorithms can be switched as you want to, and they'll update the score automatically. I'll kind of go through what these different scores kind of mean quickly, but the Poultry-Popper, the circle circumference is equal to the perimeters, the district perimeter. This district example, by the way, is the original gerrymander district from which the name came. So the measurement is the ratio between those two areas of the polygon and of the circle, given that they have equal perimeters. So obviously that score would be a little bit closer to 0 than 1. Whereas the Schwartzberg kind of measures the opposite. Yeah, the area of that circle is equal to the area of that polygon, and then the circumference is compared as a ratio against the perimeter of that polygon. So it's perimeter. The scores are, they're both basically measuring away in different ways the distance a polygon is away from a circle. Whereas the final one, the Area Convex Hull, is a little bit different in that it doesn't penalize you for very long rectangular districts, as long as it doesn't have a concave end or concave edge. It is considered a compact polygon. So in this example here, the area of the red polygon is compared against the area of the convex hull encapsulating the polygon, and then the ratio is given. Some other analysis in here. So there is a approved plan comparison. So right now we're looking at a ward plan of the city of Ashland. And there's a lot of stuff going on the map right now. I'm trying to show it all in one screenshot, but you can see under that analysis tab in the center there, you'll see City of Ashland Ward 1, Supervisory District 4, City of Ashland Ward 1, Supervisory District 7, et cetera, et cetera. What that's saying is that each row is a unique combination of a ward and supervisory district where a ward exists in more than one supervisory district. So if I click on that first row, it'll zoom me to the blocks that exist as Ward 1 and Supervisory District 4. It's flagging those for you. I mean, it's not going to stop you from passing the ward plan in stage 2 because you're allowed to conflict with your county. But it will let you know that you are conflicting with the supervisory district plan that was passed if you're drawing a municipal ward plan, and to be aware of that, and it'll show you where you're conflicting. There's obviously overlays that I can show you in a second of where those you can see it a little bit in there through the overlay, but there's outlines and stuff we can turn on as well for what was passed, so you can see it. Summarized demographics is basically a quick calculator. This is more handy, I think, when you're drawing supervisory districts, or when you're drawing wards, I should say, when you're thinking about supervisory districts. So if I want to summarize and say, okay, what do wards 1, 3 through 6, and 7 through 10, what do those add up to? So my west side of my city, if I add those together, what does that equal? If I grab these 3 wards, what does that equal? So I'm thinking about planning about supervisory districts, about aldermanic districts, and trying to think about groupings of wards, or even grouping of supervisory districts. So I'm thinking about larger legislative districts. It's just a quick way to summarize things together, adding districts together. Another toggle on there is unassigned. So if you're starting from a blank map and working your way across your municipality or your county, you want to see what's left that hasn't been assigned yet, you can quickly summarize what's left unassigned. Overlay demographics is a simple geometric overlay. You can see right now, it's just a heat map basically of whatever you happen to select. All the same options as what's on the bottom of the attribute table as far as race or ethnicity or just population. And then there's an opacity for making that more opaque. Then there's sharing plans, so which is kind of what the whole system is really built for, is for collaboration and sharing plans. If you click share plan, the public, that URL at the top, the public one, will work. Every time you share and unshare that plan, that URL changes too. So if you want to make something public and then not public, and the public and not public, you can do that and share that URL that way. When you open that URL, it opens up a read-only viewer, which is exactly the same thing as the editor, minus the editing tools. So if someone's you're having a county board meeting and you want to show everyone, everyone wants to have it on map to zoom in and zoom out and overlay and look at things and whatever, they can either watch you on your screen, or you can send the link to them and they can open up themselves and they can overlay the same tools that you're seeing on your screen. The private share URL is static in that it'll always be the same, but it can be shared without having to share the plan out. So if I send that out to somebody, they can access it without having to share the plan. So if I'm not quite ready to get the public to see my plan yet, I can share that to just a small group of people if I need to. Export import, one export tool is turned off right now, and that's the export to PDF. It will be turned on soon. What it is, exports a map basically of whatever district plan you're drawing. But otherwise, it exports block lists or GIS files. It imports those same files back in as well. So if you want to take it out to another GIS system or bring something in from GIS system, you can do that. And then there's the import shared plans too. So if you're going to import your shares plan as somebody else's, you can do that as well to overwrite your own plan. So let's do some live stuff here. I'm also going to give you a confirmation code if you wanted to confirm things. But I wanted to caveat quickly before I do that, so right now, the current geometry is Tiger 2020, and it has been cut already, split, I should say, already by what was currently submitted by the county in the July 2020 collection. So the data is approximately 8 months old. So it's already been split for this demo today. If you're the LIO for a county and you want to split your data again to see how the Tiger 2020 data stacks up against your data as of February 15th, you can do that. That's great. I'll give you a confirmation code so you can do that and you can do it later. But I'm asking that you'll hold off on running it right now until maybe at the end of the workshop or end of the day. Just because when you do that, no one else will be able to access the stage 0 application while it's running and splitting. Just so we can all just use it and so we can learn how the system actually works right now. But if you're going to split it, just wait till end of the day and then run it. Right now, the system stage 0 is split. It's set up where it'll split it so we can see it in stage 0 and we can verify or whatever. But the final post-processing where it actually splits the blocks, it integrates that into what we actually can draw on, that has been disabled for right now while we're in training. So it'll do the first part so you can see it and look at it and confirm it or whatever, but it just doesn't do the second part, which is push it actually to the drawer. Which is disabled so we can not mess up our other students, I guess. So here is that password. So here's the confirmation code you can use right now, my_code, because this will be like your LIO code or your clerk code. Not during workshop days, we're not having this. You can use the password badger. Same thing where you can have your county name and the password badger to log into it, and it's on the bottom of the screen there. So anytime it's not in this, you can use that to log in and play with the system or practice or whatever you want to do. And the confirmation code at that time, not during today, would be the word confirm. Okay, so I'm going to go to this website now. Are there any questions before I attempt a live demo?
So I'm not seeing any questions out there, but I would highly encourage anybody, just unmute yourself and ask a question or raise your hand and we can call on you. Or if you want to type a question in the chat box, we can get in there. Chances are, if you have a question, there's probably multiple people out there that have a similar question. So I would really encourage you to ask Ryan Squires some questions while you got them in front of you.
So I have a test server here so I can set it up ahead of time, like a cooking show. But your website again is wisdecade.legis.wisconsin.gov. If you're having any performance issues or drawing issues, give it a second because we're all signing in at once. It's probably spinning up a ton of services. But if it's not getting better within a few minutes, let somebody on our chat know, and they'll make sure to monitor on the enterprise side that everything is spiraled up. Or if you have any problems technical wise, they'll be able to help you. Okay, So I'm signed in as Grant County. And this is stage 0. So like a cooking show, I've kind of done a little bit of pre-work here. But what would happen in real life is that I would come in here, I'm LIO, I have an LIO confirmation code. I would fill it in right here, and please don't do this in reality because it'll lock your county. So this is what not to do. Don't do this, but just watch me do this. I would enter my confirmation code, my awesome confirmation code, which is a 6-digit code. And then I can either initiate the split with what was currently uploaded in BAS, or I can upload a new CTV boundary if I happen to have something in just a boundary form. We recognize that, if we're needing to do mid-redistricting splits, you don't want to necessarily recreate your old wards to resubmit it back into BAS to have it show up here. It seems kind of convoluted and confusing. So you can just go ahead and just upload a CTV boundary directly into it and initiate the split with that. So when I say initiate split, what that's actually doing is it's taking those block geometries and just splitting the blocks and it's filtering out, trying to find any slivers that we created that'd be less than 30 feet, and the same tolerances that are in other U.S. Census data sets where it finds legitimate splits in there. Then it'll pushes out to a system we'll show you right now where we can verify that this is actually a legitimate split. We need to do this for annexation, or if this is just something that's conflationary and geometric in nature, not really affecting. We don't actually need to create more sliver blocks, because the whole point of this is not to create bad geometry we're adding into the U.S. Census geometry, because this is what geometry is going to be used for every process coming from this upwards. So legislative and congressional districting will have to use the same geometry as well. So I click that, and then depending on the size of my county, I would get an email later on that says that the block split creation has been completed, or there was an error. Counties like Dane County take like 45 minutes. Whereas like a smaller county like Kewaunee might take like 3 or 4 minutes. It all depends on also how busy the server is at the time. So that's why I say don't do it just yet now. But what I will say is you can do this part. So this is step 1, splitting the U.S. Census blocks. This is step 2 is reviewing and verifying those blocks. So I'll use my my confirmation code, or for real this time, which is my code. If you forget it, you click right there and it'll email the LIO, which is listed right here, to give them the code again if you forget it. But then I'll click review and verify split blocks. So it should spin up hopefully here in a moment. It's probably signed in too long. Let's just double check. Come on, there we go. Okay. So the way this works is each of my, I have 78 blocks that were split by the geometry I submitted. They look like this, which aren't really pretty because these are US Census block IDs. So it's county tract ID number, and then number of splits. So I can reject them. So like right here, this is not a legitimate split. Let me refresh this, guys. Stop drawing. Stop. Stop spinning. If I zoom to him, I can see that this is just a little red sliver. This is nothing. This is just like a piece of road median, and obviously not an intentional split or have any effect on drawing my wards or supervisory districts in any way. So I'll reject this. Click reject. I move on to the next one. Again, this is a block split where my green boundary right there has come in and said this little piece sliver right here is in the different municipality than is listed as the census block. Well, again, this is not a real split. Not something I need to care about. I'll reject it. And I can kind of keep going around like this, and it's going to happen a lot. Of these 76, there's probably only 2 or 3 cases where, yeah, I do want to split that boundary. Like right here, I can see if I zoom into, this is just a, come on, base map, draw. Ooh, this bad base map, I guess. It's just a road median, it looks like, again. So, I mean, I can reject it. If I know that that was a legitimate annexation, I can predicate happening. Again, this is just a conflationary error, and I can go around like this until I find something that might have an effect on population. Let me find a good example here. I also have the option that I don't have to paste through. I can paste through it without rejecting or verifying, clicking this, or I can click on the actual changes myself to see what they are. So let me zoom into this one because it has population. It's kind of a goofy one because I think this is just conflationary, but it has population in it, so I'll just use it as an example. So I click on this. To be clear, the area in red is what's changing, municipalities. It's going from the city of Boscobel to the town of Boscobel, according to this. I can tell you right now, this is probably conflationary in nature, where this is probably supposed to be this. So we wouldn't actually split this, but just for our own purposes, we'll do this right here. So let's say I wanted to split this, and this is actually I wanted to make sure that this parcel right here was its own municipality. And this other wasn't right here. I mean, this isn't a really good example, but so I had to tell it what population. Okay, so there's only 2 people that live in that house, and they're both over the age of 18. This table will prevent you from making any errors like, well, you can't have more people that are 18 than there are of persons. I mean, persons always has to be more than the subset of which were over 18. So it'll keep you from doing that. And then once you click verify, it will remember that for next time. And then when you split it, it'll split it out. So actually, I'll reallocate the population. So this area yellow would have 8 people left in it of this demographic. With none of them would be of over 18 because I just did this ridiculous thing. And then all 20 people with all people over 18 who are white in this category would be in that red area, which is obviously not true, but just for illustration purposes. So you kind of go around and verifying and splitting. I've done this a few times with different counties. I've never taken me more than a few minutes to do, and a few minutes being like 20, 30. Well, that looks like a legitimate one. Let me see. There, that's a legitimate one. Okay, so it looks like a real case where this giant, and let's zoom over the whole thing. This giant block here. I can't grab my mouse, it's just dying right now. This giant block right here has 28 people in it, coincidentally from our last example. And this little piece right here is what is being claimed in a different municipality. I can click zoom right here to zoom to the actual part that's changing. And it looks like it's just one parcel approximately. I can go to layers right here, click on your parcels, label those parcels and see what it is, and look it up and see, okay, what I can try to figure out approximately like who lives there. Is it 2 people, 10 people? Is it an apartment building? You know, it's a best guess, best intent kind of thing. Best available information to you. So if I know that, okay, it's a family of 4 that live there, there's the 2 adults, verify. And then when I finish out, it'll eventually split. There's also one more thing I wanted to show you as we get around the bend here. I gotta find an example of it. I can't remember.
While you're navigating around,
yeah,
we got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what do we do if we cannot verify the population of the split?
We cannot verify it. I mean, it's going to be your responsibility to say if the population should be moved or not. You're moving population from one municipality to another. So if you're not sure, I mean, so again, most of the time annexations, it's empty area, right? But if you're not sure, I guess kind of use the resources available to you. It's a best guess, best intent. So maybe people at the Applied Population Lab could help you with that. They make guesses with school districts, so they can help you with that as well. It's a best intent, best guess. Here's a good example. Okay, so this entire block right here in red is going to a new municipality. The exception of it, a little sliver here on the yellow. So we filter out when it's the other way around, where you're barely entering a block and you're barely cutting it. So that's not like, okay, we'll take less of a change then. We don't want to make more change though than you've already dictated to us. So if an entire block is within let's say your boundary shifts and encapsulate the entire block, it'll show up as a white border right here saying it's moving. It'll say whole block, moving to a whole block. This is a case where it's not quite the entire block. I mean, in reality, we can see these boundaries are supposed to be coincident, but in reality, what happened was there's a little teeny sliver that got left behind that isn't necessarily being moved. But I want to move it. I don't want to leave those slivers behind. So what I'll do is I'll say move entire block to new CTV, and then I'll verify it. So that's going to move the entire block to, and including the little slivers. It won't split the block, and it'll just move the whole block to the new municipality. Because we're taking the assumption away from us that you didn't want to move the entire block. You wanted to leave a sliver, because there are cases where you'll have a small sliver like right here that you didn't want to move. So it's on you to click move entire block to new CTV unless you wanted to split it actually and create the sliver blocks, but we would encourage you not to do that because then someone has to draw with them and make sure they're actually assigned. So once you're all done and you've gone through here, I'm trying to find a whole block example. Another example of what do you check move entire block, because you can see the little edges there that are left. If it shows up yellow here, then there's something remaining. I'm trying to find a hole so you can see an example of it, but not seeing one. I thought there were a couple. Doesn't really matter, I guess. In any case, so once you're all done, you can go ahead and click submit final block edits. So this is all saved in here. So if I did 20 minutes of this is all I can take. My head's going to explode. I can exit out and come back in. And the reason why you have to use your LIO confirmation code to enter in here is we only want you, the LIO, to do this, or somebody LIO is designated to do this. And once you're done, you click submit final block edits. This part's been disabled, so you don't have to bother clicking it, but it'll say sure, and then it'll click OK. And then it's going to split it, but it'll take 5 minutes or so for it to actually split, and then it automatically integrates it into the blocks. You'll still be at stage 0 here, and it'll kick you back. The LIOs have to do one more thing now. So they split it, they like it. We can see the results of the split by clicking this census block viewer. So once you get that email back, it'll give you a link to view this, or you can click right here to view it and say, yeah, the program split the blocks the way I like them. I can zoom in on the blocks and see the splits are correct. Cool. I'm going to approve this block geometry, and let's get forward with it. So I can go ahead and click, enter my confirm code right here, or my code, and then click confirm, and that emails everybody in our system. So all the county clerk, the municipal clerk, that redistricting geometry is open, and they can start drawing plans on the geometry that you've created or edited, I should say. I saw a bunch of chatter coming in, and I can't see them, but is there a bunch of questions, Zach?
No, there's just some conversation back and forth a little bit. I mean, if you'd like to weigh in on a little bit, but I think a little bit of concern related to, if they're not sure about population. And then I think Eric had mentioned, sometimes annexation ordinances actually specify population, so they could perhaps use that as a useful reference.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really all we have. And then Mike just posted some statutory language related to 5.15.
Okay.
For helping them navigate best evidence, I think is the key word there.
Best evidence, there you go.
Words.
Okay, cool. Well, that sounds like the control. All right, so then supervisory districts can be started being drawn. I'm in Grant County. According to the population of Grant County, 5910 says that they can only have 39 people as supervisors, 39 supervisors. To create a new plan, I can create my old plans I've created, which are really ugly names. Or I can, so if I have an old one right here, I can enter my password, for my password, change the password, delete the plan. It's my plan, my personal password. I can do whatever I want to with it. So right now, for our example, I'll make a new plan. One caveat here is that the new plans remaining, there's 200 plans allocated to every single county for all kinds of plans, wards, automatic, whatever. And if you ever did run out of that number of plans legitimately, where you use all those plans, need them all, please let us know and we'll add more. No big deal. The purpose of that is that this system is meant for government use, use by local governments, counties and municipalities, or regional planning commissions. It's not intended to be used for the general public. So if we find out the credentials get released to the general public and we suddenly inundated with plans, this is just sort of a stopgap from being overwhelmed with outside resources, basically being an outside resource. So, All right, so new plan. I'll make my example plan. I'm going to set it to my actual email so I can recover my data, because otherwise it doesn't export data to me. And also I'll forget my password. There's no password requirements. I mean, you can use whatever you want to. It's just for yourself. And again, I can start as a blank plan, so everything started at 0. I can start as what's currently enacted on the ground as of February 15th. I can do what's shared. So if something's shared, I can go and select it, and I can start however full test looks. I can make a plan however they drew their plan looks. If I have a plan that I've made before that I haven't shared with anybody else, I don't want to share with anybody else, I can start as that plan. So let's say I make a plan with 18 supervisors and I'm like, this is awesome, but I want to try a hypothetical one with like 19 supervisors, but I don't want to change everything. What I could do is I could, stop what I'm doing with my 18 person plan, go back out, make a new plan for 19 people, and then just start my new 19 person one as my old one, and then just work from there. It's a way of duplicating your plans, if you will, without having to start from scratch. That also without having to share it. So in this case, I'm going to start with what's currently enacted, and create. Larger the county, the more blocks there are, a little slower draw time it'll be. But in normal usage time for something, the largest county is Dane as far as the complexity of geometry, and it should know more than 8 seconds of refresh draw time once it gets spun up. The initial draw takes a couple seconds because it's firing up things, but if it doesn't draw, click this refresh button up here. It should draw for you. I'm saying that as my test instance isn't drawing, of course. It's just in it. Did I restart the service last night? Who wants to bet my RGS services didn't get restarted? I don't see it. So let me go over to production. Hopefully that one's working.
So in case anybody missed it, like I said, Mike from LRB had posted some information related to best evidence. And then Dan also had posted some contact information for APL if you'd like to reach out and try to have them provide some assistance with their determining some population information.
So I just switched over to the production service. So we won't have quite the bells and whistles. Oops. It's not unique. That was unique. Okay, let's zoom in on here. That's the Platteville area. How about that? Okay. So there's Platteville. I'm looking at a supervisory district plan right now. So we'll do some tools and whistles here. Here's the identify tool. It just basically gives you the demographics of a single block. The pan tool is just a pan tool, pans you around. Refresh redraws the the block layer, which is what is the heaviest tax on ArcGIS server. So if it fails, it'll fail right there. So click right there. Opacity, this is a little thicker drawing, just like this. A little less drawing like that, so you can see through it. So if you're doing this kind of work, you can see through what you're doing. District assignment. So district assigning is just taking this pen button here and clicking and dragging a box, or clicking in one spot. Again, the refresh time between blinks shouldn't usually be more than what you just saw on that screen. But it'll update the demographics automatically. Update the contiguousness automatically. Let's see. I can change the color of my district by just changing right here. Or I can change it down here in the actual demographic table, or attribute table, I should say. Let me change it to something different. This is the zoom to the district. This is the zoom to the extents. To unassign something, just click this, and then the assign tool becomes the unassign tool. Use currently enacted wards. This is more handy when drawing supervisory districts than drawing ward districts. But what this does is if I turn this on, you'll see a fuchsia line. I don't know if you can see that well. Let's turn it down. A fuchsia line that kind of comes up of the currently enacted wards. And so if I was drawing a supervisory district and I was starting from scratch and I wanted to kind of paint by numbers or kind of fill them, it's going to use the existing wards basically. Instead of assigning each individual block, I could just do this where I could say, okay, any block I assign in here, let me turn this up so you can actually see it. So if I assign anything in here, all the blocks in there should get assigned. Again, right here, all the blocks in that ward should get assigned to District 1 because I'm drawing District 1. This is a quick way to use what's established anyway. Assign by region, so I can assign entire municipalities at once to a district. Undo last assignments. Jump to unassigned. So if you have it zooms to a random unassigned block, basically. Shuffle colors changes all the colors of all the districts. So if you are like me and see two districts that look too close and similar, I can't tell the difference. Two colors, so just click shuffle colors and it changes them all. And it's actually a really handy tool when you're drawing a lot and don't care what color districts are, because who cares? Switch and merge, so I can switch District 1, District 2, the numbers if I wanted to. Merge them, I can make 1 and 2 would become 2, or I can say 1 and 5 would become 5. Clear plan, everything comes with a sign. Toggle locks. If I think that like District 1 right here is amazing and I don't want to change it, I can click lock on here, and if I'm assigning District 2 and I accidentally draw across it, it will alert me that I tried to assign something that was locked, and it won't assign it, but it'll assign everything else I tried to assign. So it can be kind of handy if you're getting into corners and stuff. Update district counts. So the way this district count update works is that if you have 17 districts assigned and you update it to 16 districts, it'll say, what do you mean? Because you have 17 things assigned. You need to unassign district 17 first, and then adjust it down to 16 and update it. The way you do that is just lock everything and then unlock the one you don't want to assign anymore, then just drag everything, unassign it and unassign it. The contiguity score you can change out right here. It should be pretty instantly changing. So the numbers change down here as it calculates different calculations, different algorithms. Show approved plan. So I can see if I'm looking at right now I'm looking at the supervisory district plan. If I was looking at this during stage like 3, where we already passed this and they passed their ward plans, and I was looking at this to maybe make some edits to it, based on what was already passed by the wards. I could put those on right now to see what they look like, and I turn that on right here. Various labels and maps for various districts and the maps. Current wards, current supervisory districts, current legislative districts, current congressional districts, and current school districts. So these are from DPI. We just merged the unified and elementary school districts. It's one single unified layer. You can turn it on there and see how it, just check this box and, oops, let me turn this one on. I don't think it affects Platteville because I think, yeah, it's right around here is the school districts, this purple layer. Turn that off. Then REST service URL. So if you have data yourself that's in a feature service or a map service, you can edit here and label it here. I don't have an example handy, but copy and paste that map service in here, make sure it has the layer ID, WEX 0 on it, or whatever layer ID it is, and click view label. So, sorry, it's getting a message. Analysis. So this is, kind of moot right now because we're in stage 0, or stage 1, I'm sorry. So no currently approved ward plans, but it works for, if I was in stage 3 and I had something approved, it would tell me the list and I can just click on what wards exist in more than one supervisory district. Summarize unassigned, there's nothing unassigned right now, but combinations, kind of handy more for the ward stuff, I guess, but 1, 2, 3, 6, 9 through 11, I can see what that summarizes to. There it is. Great. So and I'm doing quick calculations and trying to think about, okay, what's Platteville's, what was Platteville's districts total up to or whatever. Demographic overlays. Let me zoom in a little bit. So it takes a little bit of taxation. We'll turn on. This is normalized by persons automatically. So if you have a 0 population blocks, it'll be as empty because it's divided by null. But if you turn that off, it'll be a little more rational. So you can change those out to whatever districts. You can start to find communities of interest this way. Then there's a share tab. So actually, before I'm talk about contiguity, let's see if this one's a good example. So right here, this is a good example. Great. So I have District 4 right here. Here's District 4, all of this. And I see that it's discontiguous. It says false right here. I click false. It zooms me to this little block right here because it's accidentally assigned, looks like to the wrong district here. So I'm not sure if that's always been the case or just something from translating things over or what, but if I unassign, sorry, what district is this? Then it's purple district. This is 3, I think, right? No, 1, I'm sorry. Yeah, 1. So if I assign District 1 right here, maybe this was from me messing around. Oh, I have District 1 locked, I'm sorry. So you can't assign it because it's locked right now, but I still have 1. Oh, there we go. 1. Try again. There we go. And then 4 is no longer discontiguous. It doesn't show false anymore. So it should update automatically for you. Okay, so share. I see my deviation, by the way, it'll turn red when it hits past 10%, plus or minus. Again, it won't stop you from passing a plan that exceeds that. It's just warning you of that fact. So sharing plans, if I click share right here, anybody who has access to WLIA can see my plan. Anybody can start a plan as my plan. This public shared URL will work. I can send it out to anybody I want to. The private shared URL will always work, no matter if it's shared or not. So let me copy here and see if I can open up this guy. So this is the viewer of that plan. It's exactly the same as my attribute table, I'm sorry, the editor, but it just has no editor, no editing tab. So they can do analysis, they can look at things, they can overlay things, they can combine things, they can export this thing out to themselves. They get sent to their email, so they want to export a block list, and this will have an option for a PDF map. So they want to export a physical map out of it. It'll be turned on soon, so they can export that out to themselves. Where'd I go? I hate this Zoom thing on the top. I was losing my bars. Okay, so export import, as I mentioned, we'll have an additional PDF export map here added soon, but it's not there. It'll only export to the owner of this plan right now. So make sure the email is correct, I guess. GIS files, it'll import or export out of those. You can import it back in. You can import a shared plan. There's something shared right now. It's available for a county, Grant County's district plan available. It's shared, so I can't get to one, but I can import the currently inactive plans, overwrite what I currently have. And that is editor as a nutshell. Any questions about editor?
Not currently seeing any in the chat box right now.
Okay, cool. Let me push Grant forward here really quick so you can see what that looks like. My code. And it's worth warning you right there, just so you know, just initiating the split, but not going in and verifying those splits. That won't push the splits to the new geometry. You have to go in and verify them because, there's obviously all those cases where they're just conflationary geometry issues, not real splits. So just warning you just to make sure that you go back and actually do that. It detected that I had split it, but I didn't confirm anything because I had never ran the final button. Okay, so supervisory districts, here's where I just drew that plan. Where is this one? So we passed it, we have an ordinance here for a tentative supervisory plan, ordinance 123.abc. I'm the county clerk and my confirmation code is as such. Confirm. There we are. So you can see that we started redistricting yesterday. We did it in one day in the county. We drew our supervisory districts in one day. We were amazing. So now you can see my municipal ward calendar has changed. So I have to start today, and I only have till April 16th to finish it. Again, all dates are fictional based on purely on when we happen to reset our stuff. So let me go to, we were just looking at Platteville, so let's go back to Platteville again. City of Platteville, there's no plans right now. They're also City of Platteville, so I'll go in there and say, my Platteville plan. Go, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Give my password away. There they are. Okay. So you can see the crazy plan. See, I see my my goofy District 1 I assigned right here is showing up now. So the green boundaries are what was created in stage 1 and passed. And if I go in here to analysis now, and this is, I'm just using what's currently enacted right now, click compare, I want to have all kinds of weird issues because I changed supervisory districts in random ways. If I click on this one, it'll say, okay, this one block exists in Ward 1 and Supervisory District 1. If I click on this one, okay, this area right here, which is browns, you can't really see. Let me, here, a good example of shuffle colors, why it's so handy. Let's see if we can, there we go. I can see that, okay, yeah, most of Ward 1 is in Supervisory District 2, like right here a little bit, and up here, this is all goofy because I just drew it all randomly, but so it shows the pairings so you can find where there might be, a section that shouldn't be. So like it does zoom to this little part right here, and then this part right here to let me know that there's 2 different parts. So I can correct that and it'll go away if I want to, or I can leave it that way and confirm it that way, and we can deal with it in stage 3. The other big difference right now between what we just saw making our stage 1 plan is that this column is different. It's showing that Platteville can have these wards that can have to be between 600 and 2,100 people due to the population of Platteville. 1 is an exception down here. If I click on District 9, it says 20 people. Let me turn off, I don't need to label my municipality here. Or I don't need the approved one. I do need the approved one. I can see that Ward 9 here is, A, it's a town island, and B, it's disconnected by a supervisory district. So Supervisory District 15, I can see the green line right here, is where this district Ward 9 is, whereas in Ward 8's in District 13. So they couldn't be in the same ward. But hypothetically, let's say that this part of municipality was part of the same supervisory district as this block right here, then they could be in the same ward. But because they're separated, just like any other blocks, if they happen to be connected physically, they can't be in the same ward because they're not part of the same supervisory district. So this is one of those edge cases that was probably allowed to have a ward of 20 people because there's no way to do it where it was still part of another ward that was in the same supervisory district. So if I wanted to eliminate this, I could do this now. There's an opportunity to do that now. It suggests back to the county that, hey, maybe draw in a way that I can have this as part of Ward 8 over here. Just as people are asking questions about that. But again, it won't stop you from submitting this. It'll just warn you that it's exceeding the range in some way. When I'm done, I'll click WLIA admin in the upper right-hand corner. You'll note right here is the help PDF, which is very well done. So it's very comprehensive. So if you have any questions, it's also probably in there. I'll come back here and I'll say, okay, I'm City of Platteville still. I want to go ahead and prove this because we passed this at the city council meeting or whatever. C1, 2, 3. Then I'm the GIS guy that works at the city, so I'm actually the one doing this. So I'm going to enter my name and email because I'm actually the one that did it. My municipal clerk just handed the job to me. So I'm going to enter my email. And here's my municipal clerk's code they handed me to do this. And then I confirm it. And then it says, oh, great, you confirmed it. If I scroll way down here, you'll see that it's green, confirmed. There's a little note right here. It'll say, just so you know, this confirmed ward plan conflicts with what's confirmed as supervisory districts. And then eventually this will actually have municipal clerks in here. We have scrub them out, I guess. And again, you can see down here the status of everybody else who's in my county who's also working through the system. So like, for instance, the village of Bagley here have not submitted anything, but they're not required to either. They have less than 1,000 people. Whereas City of Boscobel has over 1,000 people, requires a plan, but has not completed anything yet. Town of Clifton here was divided in some way by the supervisory district plan, but does not require a plan because they have less than 1,000 people. So if they don't fulfill this right now, no big deal. Stage 2 just ends the same way, but stage 3 you'll have to deal with it in some way. Either Town of Clifton will pass a plan, or the supervisory district plan will have to be passed. Once all these incompletes in red are completed, it'll kick over automatically to the third stage, and it'll show us those conflicts. Oops. So you can see these are in green because they're valid. The City of Boscobel requires something, it require attention in some way. Once all those are green, so you can see my plat bill is now red because even though I approved it and it's great, it conflicts with the supervisory district plan, so something's wrong. Once all these go green, that means the supervisory districts align perfectly with the wards at the municipal level, and then they can click, county supervisor can enter their, county clerk can enter their code here to confirm the final wards and supervisory districts, and it lets the legislature know that those are the final wards to use. And then automatic plans, of course, can be done at any time. And as I showed you earlier, the draw by ward function, it basically just turned on all the times where that ward you're drawing on now is what was passed in stage 2. And when you're drawing, all the blocks you're drawing will automatically be always all the blocks that were assigned at that ward. So you can only draw at the ward level and build those up. But it's the same functionality. What else am I saying? Once a plan is confirmed, of course, anybody can see it. So in my status, I'll view that plan, just that view or plan, that shared URL is right here, so I can open that up. I can pass it around. And so if I'm the LIO and I want to see what the municipality just did, I want to see, I can look it up right here and see what just happened. And that's basically our demo, our live demo here. So I think the plan now was to take questions and kind of let you roll with it if you want to. I'm going to leave the system with the current passwords for the rest of the day. So if you want to sit in it and play with it, you're welcome to. I won't change anything. So if you wanted to submit your geometry now and see how it processed against it, feel free to do that. Otherwise, looks like we have 3 minutes left for the whole conference.
Ryan, I think you kind of mentioned this before, but so there's an opportunity for anybody to come in at any other point throughout this week or the next few weeks, perhaps even?
Yeah, that's correct. So they can use the where's my slides? This guy. So down here, Badger confirm. So if it's today, it's Robin in my code. Any other day you want to, Badger confirm. And of course, I'll plug again the event on the 25th, right, Zach? Yeah, 25th. So it'll be it'll be the same thing we just did right now, like identically, but just if you have somebody you want to check out or see, talk more about stage 0, we can do that as well. But, and
not seeing any questions. Kim, I don't know if there's anything you need to throw out there. Thanks a lot, Dan and LRB.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I do have some slides I can throw up there if there's no other questions. And I think it might have some snazzy music with it. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. It was really informative, and looks like we had a good turnout. Peak number I had written down was 54 people. I don't know if you want to keep track of that for your records. Feel free to save the chat if you want to save all the links. You just open your chat window and you click on the 3 dots at the bottom right before you would type your chat in. You can save the chat and it will save it to your Zoom folder within your hard drive on your computer, which is handy. So, because there's a lot of information, links and different things posted in there. So you guys feel free to do that. The session was recorded today. It will become available within a few weeks after this week is finished. And instead of in Event Squid right now, you clicked join now. It will be that's where you'll go to look at the recorded session.